The mission of the Quilisasket Education Fund, QEF, is to foster, advance, and promote educational and cultural programs on environmental health and sustainability, culinary arts, and nutrition. Since QEF began, they have provided over $38,000 in scholarships to 82 culinary students and food industry professionals. In 2019, they granted $8,000 in scholarships. So far, in 2020, the requests for scholarships have totaled over $17,000. The ability to offer tuition assistance to our farm program is vital. The conversations that happen around the communal table at Quilisasket Farm ripple into our communities. They address local food security, sustainability in the professional kitchen, diversity in the food industry, and of course, they harvest, prepare, and feast on incredible farm-to-table meals. They are told time and time again that this experience is life-changing. Will you consider a donation to ensure that these conversations continue? The Quilisasket Farm has had to cancel a handful of workshops this summer due to COVID-19, but they have reshuffled their calendars and are moving forward with Farm Culinary 101 and Chefs of Color sessions in August, with added safety precautions, of course. At the farm school, participants will cook and eat from the gardens and fields of Quilisasket Farm and experience whole animal butchery, cheese making, hearth breads, honeybees and pollinators, lacto-fermented foods, wild foods, jams and preserves, farm tours, herbal infusions, and lively discussions around the table. The Chefs of Color workshop is designed for communities of color, helping them bridge the gaps in education around food and farming theory and practices. They rely on donations to help provide these opportunities. Please visit the Quilisasket Education Fund website at qefund.org and click on the Bloomerang link to donate. Pilot R&D co-founder and author Ali Bouzari returned to the podcast to help me reintroduce the Encore production of our podcast episode together, and we chatted long enough for a new episode of its own. The Pilot R&D team has moved from the picturesque but remote Phillipsburg to the Bay Area, and they've been building up their chef collaboration CPG brand Render, as well as continuing to serve clients in restaurants and CPG in culinary innovation. You can find details about Ali, Render, Pilot R&D at their website, pilotrd.com.
At the very least, from a creative and just purely Epicurean perspective, the watching chefs unleash their creativity on takeout and like pantry staples has been a rare pleasure in the past 6 months of crazy.
Yeah, I really liked that you led, I think right before we started recording, that chefs are really creative. And the reason we go into food is in part because of that creative juice that kind of runs through all of us and looks very different across the spectrum of chefs and culinary professionals. But it comes down to we love to cook food and we love to serve it to others. Obviously, the way that we're serving others is very different today. But the core of it is creativity, wanting to serve, wanting to get a vision and a passion that we have out to other people so that they can enjoy it.
Totally. Yeah, I mean that's the whole point. And our thesis for a while has been that chefs are probably better at that specific skill set than anybody. And I don't know if a major reckoning is coming, and the literal geography of the way our cities are laid out, and the number of restaurants and the density of restaurants and the way that restaurants exist is going to be altered by all of this. One thing that I think we'll be able to depend on is chefs are going to figure out a way to make tasty stuff. And with all of the uncertainty swirling around, that's a very comforting anchor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the reason that we're back on the air together is we're airing encore episodes for the Peas on Moss podcast for season 4.5. 4.5 because it's the middle of the year.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I survived.
You made it.
And I guess it's a pivot for the podcast in the sense that instead of going from interview based where we really get to hear your origin story, the listeners have heard your origin story. They've gotten to know a little bit about your perspective. And so we're back together to hear what you've been up to lately, and to kind of reflect on what was said in 2017 versus how you feel now. Um, the episode that I really liked that you and I recorded were when we were talking about the chef versus scientist kind of style and mentality.
Mm-hmm.
You've obviously now spent the last 3.5 years living in both of those worlds. Um, Talk to me about what some of those learnings have been over the last couple of years.
Well, when you and I first talked, I was advocating a lot for both sides are really important. I still don't think that's ever going to change. I think that um, only being a scientist or only being a chef, to me, is always going to feel like an incomplete skill set. Obviously, you can have a thriving career, never actually putting on an apron, and you can have a thriving career, never going to culinary school or working in a restaurant. Those are, I mean, I'm not a gatekeeper of that by any means, but I think that there is so much potential for combining the two. They're such good bedfellows. They unlock so many new ideas and neural pathways, and they just make life so much easier when they're together. That I'm going to continue to advocate for both chef and scientist to cohabitate inside one skull, for as many people as possible. Um, but I think over the past few years, scientists are frustrating, and I think consistently I become uh, less enamored with a scientist's way of thinking, and I don't mean thinking step by step and being evidence based and the scientific method. All of that is evergreen, and all of that is great, but there is, if I'm going to make gross generalizations, it might as well be against scientists, but there is a pattern that just continues to solidify of scientists in the food world, tending to be more linear thinkers, more suspicious of change and creativity, and more hesitant to take creative and cognitive leaps. And I don't know that I've ever seen that yield positive results. Um, I'm not saying that everybody should just shoot from the hip and sling it and see if it works. Everything should be thought out. But one of the things that we've taken to telling all of our new clients, anytime we hop on the phone with somebody to start a product development project, one of the first things is we say, our background is unique. We come from super fine dining restaurant R&D, and also we have graduate degrees in food science. Just so you know, the magic that we take from our fine dining experience is not a mandate that all food be really difficult and complicated and require 40 different hands to put together one plate, and constantly trying to foist really high toned and fancy ideas like anchovies and bananas, or what America really needs in their potato chip seasoning.
Ooh.
But rather the thing, right? The thing that matters coming out of the chef world is chefs are ruthless, pirate-like problem solvers, and that is the type of uh, brain function that I really appreciate most, and that I think is really important for working with food. I think that yes, you having a fundamental understanding of food science and the way that the physics and chemistry of food make things possible is indispensable. But I think that there's so much there. There's such a huge body of information and such a huge tradition of food science as being this reductive laboratory thing that it becomes really cumbersome and really hard to make progress if you don't have some chef squirreled away in the corner of your brain to just cut through and have some ruthless pragmatism, some quick thinking on your feet. I don't know. I found that more often than not over the past 3+ years since we did our first chat, that the chef side of my brain and of my colleagues' brains has saved our bacon and the bacon of our clients more often than not. And so it's almost like you need the science to build the chassis of the car, but you're kind of always going to want to let the chef drive. The chef is like the Manhattan cabbie who knows all the shortcuts, and the scientist is like trying to pay attention to printed out directions on MapQuest. It'll get you there, but it won't get you there with as much verve and efficiency and creativity as maybe thinking like a chef will. So both remain important. I think my views have evolved a little bit on not letting go of the chef head on a swivel approach.
Oh, that's really interesting. I do want to actually double click on the analogy that you chose, because I do agree with you that there is the mentality of printed MapQuest versus Manhattan Cabbie in places, even in some of the larger companies that I've had the opportunity to see the inner workings of. It's like, oh, this is interesting. And in the company I'm in now with Griffith Foods, we have a cross-functional group of food scientists with culinary experiences, and then chefs who've moved into product development or innovation roles. But they are all often in different skulls, if you will, these passions and ways of thinking, which theoretically would make a hive mind that works that way. Have you observed that in your world, where you have these different upbringings, I guess, or career experiences together as a group, but not in one person's brain? And how is that different than what you just described?
Obviously, if people can collaborate well and they have a good rapport and good chemistry together, the parts can make just as an effective whole as if one person has a hybrid background. Like I'm a total believer in that. So I think it can go either way. There is often a need for somebody who really sees the whole picture, though, to help keep things moving forward. I think in product development specifically, another big theme that has emerged is people are frequently surprised by how hands-on we are in terms of scale up. Like I think every profession has their preferred nomenclature of what they want to be called. We really try to correct people when they introduce us on a collaborative call, like you mentioned, with a lot of different stakeholders. When we're introduced as like formulators or food techs or the person making the recipe, I guess my hottest take of the past couple of years is that recipes are meaningless and worthless unless they can be executed at the scale that you're getting paid for. So a recipe in a restaurant is completely irrelevant if none of your line cooks can follow it. A recipe for a CPG company is completely valueless if it can only be executed on the benchtop and actually has no way to be done at scale. And something that is scalable doesn't just mean that the amount of salt or the amount of stevia stays at 0.08%, whether you're making a pound or 100 pounds. Scalability is, this is a very stupid phrase, but scalability is maybe a lifestyle. Like it's maybe a constant vigilance of anything that can go wrong will. So how do you watch out for thinking about a drum of blueberry juice? What is going on with a drum of blueberry juice that wouldn't maybe go on with a cup of blueberry juice? And how are things settling? And what should you think about if you're trying to schedule a production run and making sure that that drum of blueberry juice takes 2 or 3 days to thaw versus 20 minutes to thaw in a cup? And like all of these weird nitty gritty things that you'd never think you'd actually have to think about if your job is in theory just making a blueberry muffin that tastes good and has the right moisture content. So working with a bunch of different people who have different skill sets to come to bear can totally work as long long as there's one person or ideally more who understands enough of the big picture that they can quarterback and bring everybody together to have direction as a unit. Because otherwise, I've found that people can be really great at their individual jobs, but if there's no like grout to hold it all together, it has a higher potential of just crumbling.
That is such a great analogy in comparison. And literally, that's what my boss is trying to coach me through right now. He also has a culinary background, moved into sales a few years ago. So I have a
Yeah.
mentor baked in who's trying to push me through the same learning curve that he survived,
Mm-hmm.
which is great because it's like, okay, I can see that there is life at the end of this tunnel, but man, I have hit every single wall, I think, as I
Yeah.
learn the angle of this curve. But he sat me down and was like, okay, look, at this point in this role, you're the expediter. You can see all of the stations. You've worked all of those stations. You have to expo now. Expo better, call those tickets smarter, because that's the role that you're in now. And I think that might be where having the culinary and the food science background in one skull is the most effective, is, as you said, have the person who has the big picture, who has the understanding and the knowledge, and can quarterback it differently or expo it
Mm-hmm.
differently,
Mm-hmm.
than each of us in our each little stations, so to speak.
Yeah. And I honestly think that in food with the gauntlet has been thrown of, all right, almost every new food product is going to have to be made out of food rather than very, very isolated, single purpose ingredients that you can pick and choose and move like lights on a switchboard to dial up whatever you want. So now if we're working with lemons and sweet potatoes instead of citric acid and modified starch, everybody's game has to be elevated a little bit to make that work. And so for us, what that looks like is not only is there just one person functioning as the expediter, as you put it, which is, I think, a great restaurant analogy, but I think it's kind of all of our responsibility to understand a little bit of everything. And that's not just like science versus chefiness. It's everybody should have a good grip on basic principles of food safety. Everybody should have a good grip on what the difference is between natural flavors, extracts, and artificial flavors. Everybody should have a good grip on uh, what UHT processing is, what hot fill processing is, and what retort processing is. And for us, at least, that that is true. Like one of my colleagues, Jen, ostensibly is her title is relationship manager. Her job is to make sure that everything is being communicated properly, all the information is being gathered correctly. She does a ton of work on sourcing and ingredient procurement, but she also can speak very eloquently and with a very informed perspective on why doing a sugar-free gummy bear without a ton of fiber is going to be chemically difficult. And I think right now, at least, that's very unique, but I hope it becomes less unique. Like, I think that anybody, especially in the product development world, or anybody who's trying to make new food happen in some respect, I think we should be required to go through some like basic survival training in just basic entry level understanding of shipping. What should be shipped refrigerated? What should be shipped frozen? What the considerations are for shipping something ambient. I think everybody should have a basic understanding of what the FDA is okay with versus not. Like, I think thinking about putting CBD into an iced tea should understand that CBD is federally illegal, like to put into food products. It's not illegal to have, but it is a breaking of the law to put CBD into a food product and sell it for end user consumption. And not necessarily drawing a conclusion one way or another, but I think we should all just understand
Mm-hmm.
that basic fact. We should all understand. I'll take the CBD one even further. CBD is not water
Mm-hmm.
soluble. Full stop. There are forms of it that can be dispersed in water. There are ingredient suppliers who formulate CBD in a way that can be applied to primarily watering end products. But the thing is not water soluble. And just having that little fact that your salesperson is aware of, that your ops person, your packaging person, your sourcing person, and your quote unquote formulator, if everybody's on the same page with that, then when you get a call that, I don't know, your milkshake is doing something weird, everybody can immediately jump to what's going on here. What role could the CBD be playing in that? And again, I'm not saying that everybody needs to be a culinary scientist. Everybody needs to have the same product development skill set. But I think it's the information age. Everything that the FDA has ever said is literally one Google search away now. So I think the average expectations of a person's tool belt, regardless of their specialty, if you're doing food, if you're doing specifically like new product development for retail food, I kind of think you got to know a little bit of all the basics to help better interpret the direction of whoever is quarterbacking or expediting.
I mean, you're kind of advocating for what, a crash course, or are you advocating for whoever the project lead is to table set with, the 10 things we should know before we go into this category? You're talking one about an industry opportunity and you're talking about a team opportunity.
Hopefully both. Again, like it's going to be different strokes for different folks at the end of the day in all of this, but I've noticed that there's so many different forms of like a team culture with a company, and we work with dozens of different food companies and they all have their different spin. I think the ones who succeed with the highest frequency are the teams where, again, like the marketing person also understands a little bit about sugar, and the supply chain person also understands enough to be literate in packaging and enough to be literate in operational considerations. They still have people on each of these teams that are specialized, but it feels like for a lot of these clients, and I know firsthand for our team, that there's some kind of group continuing education that's going on. Like our culture at Pilot is we have a thing called Lunch and Learn every week, where whenever one of us stumbles on something and we're like, hey, I just learned this really important thing about water activity, or I just learned this really interesting thing about hibiscus, or I just learned this really interesting thing about Tetra Pak and what the future looks like for them. In a simpler time when we were actually eating lunch in an office, instead of just munching silently and doom scrolling through Twitter, we would talk about the thing that we learned and try to just bring everybody up to speed in even just to a conversational level on different kinds of acids in salad dressings. And I think it may start from a crash course or some sort of Research Chefs Association or some boot camp that you can sign up for. That would be great. But then also, if you're building a team or if you're part of a team, advocating for internal continuing education, sharing ideas and expertise, I think it can go a long way.
I agree with you. And of course, my brain is going 85 different directions on what to tell the president of the RCA and the education committee. And then also, as a professional in the industry, trying to figure out what that growth, that next growth target should be as we maintain these growth mindsets wherever we are in our careers.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And if it seems daunting, again, I don't know, and I can say this enough, like just conversational understanding of these things is great. And I think maybe more effective than like yet another workbook with yet another certification that you can get of, certified person who knows a little bit of everything. I don't know that has utility as much as just creating a culture where blinders are not acceptable and myopia is not permissible, where you are just being really good at understanding supply chain should not be quite enough. You should be really good at understanding supply chain and literate in everything else that goes into making food, because unlike we may have talked about this just even in passing before, but food is super unhackable. Like, food is dumb and resistant and slow and plays by very concrete rules that we will never change. There's just certain stuff that humans can eat and certain stuff that they can't.
Physics is still a thing.
And that kind of sets, physics is still a thing. Whereas in Silicon Valley and in the automotive industry and in, music engineering, physics isn't always the ultimate word. And if it is, there's a lot broader horizons for the kinds of physics that will fly than in food, where humans can eat like 5 different things, and different mixtures of those things are the only materials innovations will ever come up with. So having a little bit more just practical entry level understanding, I think, first of all, is conceivable, because there really aren't that many tricks that food has to offer. And realizing that these rules are going to be so interconnected. And I keep saying, like, supply chain and packaging and stuff, to us, that is equally as important as the genius who's figuring out the right salt and blueberry combination to make this chocolate bar really pop. Because uniquely in this world, it's all related. And if it doesn't matter how smart you are at developing products, if the form of blueberry that you're looking for can't be sourced in order quantities that are relevant to the scale you're trying to hit, or without bulking agents that you're trying to avoid, or in a timely fashion that's not seasonal, it doesn't matter how good you are at product development. So why don't we all sort of up our game and learn, like, professional empathy with the jobs of everybody else who goes into food? Because if food's always going to make stuff hard, the only way we're going to get anything done is everybody really being on their game. And so understanding how the person next to you's game works is maybe one of the biggest ways we've become more efficient and more on top of our stuff over the past couple of years than anything.
Wow. Well, thank you, Allie, so much for we had more of a full-on episode than we did an intro to the previous episode, the Encore playing. But no, This is fantastic. I really want to double click on a couple of those ideas, but I will let you go. I will let the listeners get on with listening to the episode itself. But folks, go find Ali Bouzari's book. It is called Ingredient. You can also reach out to Pilot R&D. You're in the Berkeley area now, right?
Yep, we have a shiny new test kitchen in Berkeley,
Excellent.
just off the highway.
Okay, well, I'll put the links in the show notes, but let's us chat again soon. I think there's an opportunity for episode number 3 together. And again, Allie, thank you so much for your friendship and support of the podcast. I really appreciate the wisdom that you've dropped just so willingly. Looking forward to seeing you, I guess probably virtually for the next little while, but someday in real life.
Likewise, I'm always in.
Cool. Okay, I'm going to stop it there. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm going to jump to another podcast, actually about table setting on food safety basics that every product developer or research chef should know going in. Partly not to drive the quality and food safety team insane, and partly because I think we need to know these things. It's a level up, right, from restaurant food safety into CPG food safety. Or when you get a result with a really high TPC, you're not like, toilet paper consumption? No, that's not it. It's like, all right, guys, we need to get some basic terms together. So. Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you. Yeah, okay. Looking forward to it.
Have a good weekend.
All right.
Bye.
All right, you too.
Peas on Moss will be right back. Would you support Peas on Moss? I'm looking for core sponsors who are seeking ways to connect with product developers through dynamic conversations set up on podcasts. Speakers and advertisers have gained clients by being heard on Peas on Moss, and I want to keep the network and relationships going. With your annual sponsorship commitment, you'll help keep the podcast going by contributing towards the cost of hosting the show. You're also helping us increase awareness of food manufacturing, food science, and culinology, and supporting both product development and awareness of the industry at large. Your presence on the podcast is also evergreen, as these episodes are posted permanently on the website and available for streaming on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher. Please contact Kimberly today to become part of this podcast movement. Visit peasonmoss.com and click on Sponsor the Show for details. Welcome back to Peas on Moss. Do you ever find yourself having to dash off to the Google and look up some diet trend or some word where you're like, where did that come from? Oh my gosh.
This is like, you could not write this as a joke better, but I mean, this is not a joke. We keep the Whole30 search on Google open on one of our laptops all day. Like, it never closes.
Really?
Yeah, I'm serious. That and paleo are the two most perplexing dietary trends. Not in, I don't think that they're problematic for people to follow, but the lack of consensus as to what they actually comprise is staggering. It's crazy. Like, we have, at any given time, there may be 3 clients who are considering trying to turn out a paleo project, and they will all give us different acceptable ingredient lists.
Awesome.
The Whole30 thing is equally murky. It keeps getting updated. So we've started telling our clients straight off the bat, listen, we will formulate this product with X ingredient, but if we, get 3 months down the line and all of a sudden whatever shadowy entity is calling those shots decides that okra is no longer Whole30, there's not much we can do about that.
Yeah, no, so that kind of goes back to the mise en place of a project. Really is, you've got your pantry, it's well stocked, but understanding the scope of a project might actually be the linchpin right there, is laying out all of the expectations, or as many as you can think of, up front, knowing that scope creep can happen, but it's kind of the developer and the project manager's job to try and dig in their heels as much as possible and say, okay, this is what we agreed on, and this is the timeline we agreed to.
Yes. And I'd say that'd be one other instance where we differ a little bit from maybe the norm of coming from really, really intensely hospitality driven backgrounds. Mm-hmm. We try to run our client interactions much more based around that model where, again, I have worked with other product developers on consulting projects where there are, multiple stakeholders involved. And the speed of turnaround on correspondence and the precision with which people communicate in this side of the industry, I'm sure you've seen it. It's kind of like frightening in how much it can be lacking at times. There are times that I've seen people miss like production deadline cutoffs just because they're not checking their email. And we at Pilot we come from a world where immediate and crystal clear communication is the norm and is the mandate. And our CEO Dana used to be a corporate M&A lawyer, and I mean we're coming from fields where being on top of everything is paramount. You can't function without it. And so there are times when I've seen it out there in the industry when people are so preoccupied with running their trials and getting things working on the benchtop that the client hospitality experience goes by the wayside. So that's an interesting one. And we try to maintain as open and clear and precise channels of communication as possible from the get-go. So one of the things we've done is we've created a basically template questionnaire for our clients, just talking about a lot of the usual suspect stuff of what other competing products do you see out there? How do you envision this product fitting into the market and so on and so forth. But really for me, the most important segment of that questionnaire is which of these ingredients do you jibe with? Which of these ingredients is a non-starter? And it's just this gigantic list of flours and acids and fruits and vegetables and animal-derived products and kind of like fermented yeast-derived products. And like it's every twist and turn that we could take to adapt to any specific ingredient sensitivity of a client is listed there in black and white, so that they can either flag it as something that they don't want to have in their food, or they can sincerely ask us, like, why would you want to use rice flour in this product? Like, what would it contribute? And, sort of want to get into a discussion about what our motivation would be for including it, so that they can weigh in their mind of whether or not it's worth whatever ingredient label sacrifice they're making.
Yeah, and that's so important, especially as the market does continue to change, to get a feel for where they are. And then, like you were kind of saying, from the hospitality industry, especially as you start to know your guests or your clients, kind of understand what makes them tick and what they could possibly react to, kind of anticipate their needs. From our perspective, it was making sure that the right temperatured Perrier lands on that guy's table at this time when he leans forward this way, and you're like, okay, here you go.
Yep, exactly. And it's very important as well to help prevent whoever you're working with from painting themselves and really the whole project into a corner. Mm-hmm. And so that product questionnaire helps us treat compromise as a early steam valve in an interesting way, where we have clients who have very specific visions of what a product could be, and also very, very specific visions of how much that product is going to cost to produce, or how it's going to be produced, or what it's going to be made of. And if we have those conversations as clearly as possible at the beginning, before we've even gotten into ideation or been wed to a particular flavor profile, we can spot situations where we say, this is a situation where unfortunately the laws of physics and chemistry are just not going to support this product coming into being. It's just not possible to have a plant-based food that doesn't have soy or any sort of refined protein isolate or something like that will have 20 grams of protein per 35 gram serving. It's just not possible. Because if we started with the most protein rich ingredient that we could, the nutritional content of that ingredient by itself is not going to hit your mark. So when we start diluting it with things in the pursuit of making it taste delicious, there's just no way to hit that mark. So we can tailor that conversation to make sure that the target is realistic and hittable before things even get, emotionally bound up in how the product tastes.
And I think that's interesting too, the potential difference between some of the food scientists I've worked with and some of the chefs I've worked with is our definition of a hittable target. It's my personality, it was the personality of the MC team to stretch further than you would think you could get to hit a target. And then when you do hit, say if you get a glancing blow off of the target, it's like, oh, okay. Well, now I know how many feet it is and at approximately the angle. Versus some of the scientists and developers I've worked with, especially some who kind of get comfortable where they're at, and it's irrespective of the number of years that they've spent in a brand. They'll say, well, you can't do that. You can't do that in that kettle or on that line. So we just won't even go there. Oh. And some of it is because it's difficult and it's painful and costs more in labor and waste potentially to figure out where that target is. But man.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I get told that various times, sometimes in a single day. Just a quick clarification. The targets that I was talking about were really just the math based ones where it's just, you can't, you can't fit 30 grams of something in a 20-gram package.
Yeah, fair enough.
But yeah, I totally agree. The idea of rejecting the possibility of creating a gluten-free flatbread without, with a clean label or something like that, as impossible is lazy. I totally agree with that. Those elements of trying to coax functionality out of places that they haven't been historically in the world of food science driven product development. I think that's our whole business model is trying to work on those more challenging products. And in general, just by the process of self-selection, the projects that come across our desk are usually the ones that are a little more stump ridden. So it makes for interesting days of work for sure.
Yeah, and not to belittle some of the gosh darn hard work and elbow grease that has to go into it. I mean, I'm sure you've had days where you're just, scraping pots because iterations 47 through 55 just shellacked themselves to the pan, and you're like, word.
Oh no, that was Wednesday.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I mean, we've gotten as good at cleaning as we have at cooking. It's the whole thing of not having a dishwasher and also being obsessive cleaners. So yeah, that is definitely a part of it. And I think there is one of the things that sets a good day for me apart from a bad day is when the urge to do one more round of iterations or one more round of trials rather than just packing up and heading home. When that urge comes naturally, it's always a better day for me, because the unfortunate truth about our company is we're going to have to get the work done either way. So that urge may need to be fabricated by caffeine and like jumping jacks, but yeah, they're the really established approaches to whether it's the very refined functional ingredients, or whether it's keeping things to more conventional flavor profiles, or whether it's just working on projects that are more straightforward and knowable, like salad dressings and chips. Those paths are very efficient because it's very well trod land, and there's a game trail to follow. And the act of bushwhacking, of trying to go off road and rediscover a whole ingredient that can be substituted for something that consumers one way or another won't enjoy, or the idea of trying to find a way to make harissa an approachable idea to middle America. All of those things involve a lot of beating your head against the wall. And like, that's something Pilot is currently hiring. And one of the things that we're trying to be very upfront about is there are a lot of flashy, beautiful, like El Bulli test kitchen moments that happen where, we're sitting there all crowded around an anchovy and going, whoa, we just discovered something. That definitely happens. But space between those moments are days and weeks of just complete bullshit of it's very valuable bullshit. It's just trials and trials of eking out a way to get to a milestone. And then sometimes ending up throwing out that approach altogether after, 87 iterations of it. There's tons of that. And that's part of the game. But for us, at the end of a very fruitless, messy day, our job is to play around with food. So it really is not that big of a deal. but that is, I mean, the state of the way, and luckily now the media portrayal of what we do has gone from being shadowy figures in a mad scientist lab concocting not necessarily good for you food to being these like, all around the world, there's these auteur chefs who are sitting in a beautiful, like, mid-century modern warm industrial design space that looks like it's straight out of a architecture blog, like just playing around with the ripest persimmons all day and then going out and getting coffee. Like that portrayal is equally as wrong as the shadowy people in the dungeon.
Yeah, we're somewhere in between there.
Yeah, but at least it's like a really romantic idea. And I mean, it is true. Like we're in Sonoma County. I did go out this morning and pick a persimmon from the tree that I didn't even know was growing in my backyard until it started having fruit on it. Like that stuff is real. And it helps with the fact that, yes, this is still very methodical, very meticulous, often tedious work to get to somewhere new.
But I think that's the trick, right? You're going to find your passion in that. And if you don't have the bloody knuckle times, then you're not going to appreciate the ripest persimmon times.
Yeah, I have said all along, I don't think I have any like natural proclivity for doing this stuff better than, necessarily any other person. I just was really into it from the get-go. So I spent a lot of time Sherlock Holmesing my way through the night, reading stuff until 4 a.m. just because I was interested in it. And I have tried to do other paths. I thought for a long time I wanted to be a pure biochemist working on like chromatography and stuff in a lab. And I was really bad at it. I mean, I was never going to get anywhere, because I didn't care enough to go above and beyond. That whole cliche thing that, your teachers tell you in high school and your coaches tell you in high school, and that, giving 110%, leaving it all out on the field. You only do that if you really like whatever you're doing. And more than natural talent or education or whatever it is, I think the most important weapon is just really, really putting your finger on whatever the deepest, darkest nerve in your brain is, and figuring out what you're interested in. And it's not a luxury that everybody can have because there has to be some serendipity in it. But if you can find something that keeps you up at night being excited, you're probably going to be better at that thing because then you have all night to read about it.
That's true. And then you have to go back to your day job. I mean, think about the chefs who've now written books. I mean, I was thinking of Heston Blumenthal's history and how he was playing around with recipes during his evenings so he could work during the day. Or even Stephen King, he was writing late into the night, and even threw away his first manuscript of Carrie because he was like, okay, this is my passion, but I suck at it, so forget this. And his wife is the one who pulled it out of the garbage and was like, hey, honey, this is actually a good book.
Yeah, absolutely. The book, my book got written while I was writing a dissertation during the day, starting pilot during the day. Like I never got to be a full-time writer. And that process, like writing a book is a huge bummer sometimes.
The word author is so sexy sounding.
Yeah, like whatever. What's cooler is that like, I got to give ideas to people that I haven't had a chance to meet yet, which is like amazing. But writing a book is totally not worth it. And getting a PhD is totally not worth it if this is not the thing that you stay up late at night wanting to do. It's just, there are so many other options now. That just our time is so much better spent on just if you can find it. And I know that it's like it's a luxury to be able to find that, but to be able to find something that really makes you want to wake up, that is priceless. And we live in a world where pivoting in a career is not nearly as hard as it used to be. And I'm really grateful for that, because that means that a lot of people, even in, I don't know, their late 50s, are going to find the thing that really makes them tick, that's going to help them contribute what they were meant to contribute to everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think some of that is, especially for the people in their late 50s who are listening, your life experiences shape who you are and the uniqueness of what you're bringing to the table. So even if you're going to join a crowded room of an industry, and that could be chefs, that could be architects or artists, watercolor painters, whatever it is, your spin is what makes it unique, and that's your value proposition.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm never going to win a James Beard Award. Um, I am never going to get published in the Journal of Science. Um, I just my natural talents at being a chef and being a scientist are just not enough to put me at the top of the totem pole. But by blending it in a very specific way, specific to my, other things that I'm interested in, like speaking to humans and making analogies and making things approachable, that gives me a little tiny corner of the world where I can do better than I could in other sort of more siloed fields. And I'm totally fine with that. There was a moment when I was struggling with that, and I really, really wanted to become, the best chef I could imagine. And I realize now, as long as I am respectable and able to at least hack it on the easiest station in whatever chef we're collaborating with's kitchen, that's all I need to be in order to be able to feel worthy of having at least a dialogue with that chef and bringing the other side of what I do, the scientific side, into the conversation. Because my thought was, there's a bunch of people out there who have zero empathy with what a chef is going through, or with what a consumer is going through, or what a product developer is going through. And so if I can have a little piece from each side of that conversation, then, ideally I'm not being a jerk to anybody.
And that's really probably in the end what matters is, were you a jerk and how many times, and did you get to do the thing that really spun your dials as much as possible? And you're right, it is a position of privilege for us to say we get to pursue the industries and careers that really do excite us and that we would probably do for less pay, although I'm not going to complain about my ability to be paid for my job. But I found myself doing those things for fun when I was a line cook. And so to get to do this now for full-time work, it's fantastic. Yeah, and in the end, that's really what it does come down to, and what those relationships were like along the way.
Yeah, and I think there's a nice little extra blanket of security, at least in my mind, knowing that if this whole thing went sideways and all of a sudden, everything completely changed, I could at least be very happy just, cooking in a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
It's great to be in love simultaneously with two different fields, because it gives you room to shift around and feel things out. And I absolutely love that.
And I think as our careers progress, as the years kind of start to rack on, I think we're going to see more of that marriage of science and food, and it's going to be less and less. These are two separate industries. I know obviously the IFT and the RCA work very hard to combine food and science. They still try to maintain, I think, a mystique between the two, as though we're the gatekeepers and have the magic wand between the two. But I think it's going to merge even further than this.
I'm very excited for the day when people on the more culinary side stop even using the word science. And I mean that may sound counter to what the sentiment I'm trying to express, but it's interesting because the entire world of the culinary industry is predicated on knowing how stuff works. Mm. It's building stuff out of other stuff. And so the like infrastructure is already there. Mm-hmm. The paradigm is already there that we're sharing information about how stuff works. Why not just make that information the scientific information and stir the vitamins into the mashed potatoes? That's a big part of what I've been trying to do is find a way to have all chefs talk about this stuff, have all product developers talk about this stuff, have everybody having the same discussion, regardless of what they like to do aesthetically, mm-hmm. regardless if they're doing packaged goods or if they're cooking in an avant-garde style, or if they're working on something that's an intersection of cutting edge food and tech or whatever. It would be great to just take away the idea of science as a choice you have to make,
because it's really not a choice that it's even open to make. Like the the fundamental rules of physics and biochemistry are gonna dictate what happens to your food, whether or not you want to pay attention to it. Mm-hmm. So it'd be great to just, give everybody the XM receiver to pick up on those waves, so that that choice isn't one that actively has to be made.
Yeah, and that's addressing the attitude towards science, the attitude towards culinary, and to the food world, I think. Because at least the cooks that I went through school with, the ones who have tended to land in and keep leadership roles are the ones who really embraced applying math and science to their craft. And then the ones who kind of fell off to the side or got distracted by life circumstances were sometimes the ones who didn't really want to try loop all of those together and kind of figure out where the thread goes and find out that all of the eyes are lined up. You just have to push the thread through.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Peas on Moss podcast. For more information about Peas on Moss and to inquire about being a guest or a sponsor on the show, check out the website peasonmoss.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat. Want more information about research work? Listen to the Culinologist series on Peas on Moss. If you liked what we're doing, please rate and review us on iTunes or Stitcher, and please share the show with your friends. Our theme music was composed by Joshua Schaub. Editing is provided by Chris King at Moon Palace Productions. Peas on Moss, because mise en place makes me sound like I had it all together.